One of the biggest lies that's holding you back is the idea that it is selfish or vain to care about your body, and it's actually better if you
Mm,
don't. That couldn't be more untrue. You cannot expect something to blossom and grow unless you pay attention to it.
yeah.
That's just with anything. That's a principle across the board. You can't expect a romantic relationship to flourish if you never look at each other and never have a conversation, never have a positive interaction. You can't expect your children to grow up strong, confident, and well loved if we don't pay attention to them. We can't expect our home to be well kept. Like it's the law of atrophy. If we
Mhm.
don't pay attention to things and make them better, they're actually not just staying stagnant, they're getting worse. And it's the
Right.
same thing with our bodies and with our health. And I think as Catholic women, we know that with the soul, we have to be consistently paying attention and pulling out the weeds and paying attention to the garden of our hearts. But there's a disconnect. And I think it's very sinister that the women who know that we're body soul composites, right? We know theology of the body, we know the unity of body and soul, we know the goodness of the body and the goodness of the human person and the transformation and redemption that's possible through the body. But there's been a separation of it being like, okay, yeah, my soul matters, but my body, oh, I hate my body. Or like I complain about it. Or the way that I talk about it, like no one should ever know how I say, how I talk about it. But there's been this separation and we need to bring that unity back.
Florencia, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, first things first, can you tell us how your personal journey shaped the framework that you've created in Made Good?
Yes, I joke that everything that I teach is because I did the opposite and I have tried it all. I've done every diet, I've fallen for so many fads, and I just suffered, honestly, a lot, like within my own body. So I had my little Bermuda Triangle of suffering, which was disordered eating and body image issues that really kind of warped and distorted my perception of my body for, I would say, the majority of my life, and just had me on this endless pursuit of skinny and just like a lot of self loathing. Then a second layer was in middle school. Once my period came, that sucked. It was awful. It was really, really, really miserable. And just going to doctor's appointment after doctor's appointment and being told that my only option was birth control. And if I didn't want to get on that, like there was nothing else they could do to help me, I could just take like 8 ibuprofen a day on my period. And then the third piece, yeah, which is like so common. I say that and people are like, yep, same.
Mhm.
And then the third piece was I had really confusing gut issues that were just labeled as IBS, but I like knew that it had something to do with food. And so this kind of ended up leading me down a path of, okay, I don't trust that just going to the doctor's office is going to be enough to be healthy. And I really, really began to dive into a more holistic form of care and seeing, okay, what can I do with my food to help heal? And really making sure that that was aware. But that's also very complex when you also are at war with your body and you use food to be
Mhm.
safe. So it was a kind of a convoluted journey for many, many years. But it was through a lot of healing that the Lord has done that really opened my eyes and really made me passionate to be like, well, of all people, I really believe that Catholic women have this capacity to understand things very, very deeply
Mhm.
when it comes to the body. And the Catholic Nutritionist was born.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I think that experience that you describe of going to the doctor and realizing that's not going to be enough and I'm going to have to do my own research, that is sadly just the experience of so many people these days. Were there any specific things? I know you mentioned diet, but then that gets complicated. Were there any specific things that changes or tweaks that you made that really helped?
Well, in terms of the gut issues
How
or
are
the
you
period,
feeling? Yeah. Both.
the one thing I didn't realize was how your body's symptoms are its only way of communicating with you. And I did not realize that my body's favorite way to communicate with me is my gut. Like, easiest way to get my attention that something is up or that I'm way too stressed. And so, one thing I didn't recognize was the stress connection, that it wasn't just about
Mhm.
food. So, I was like going down these rabbit holes. I was vegetarian, I was carnivore, I did everything in between, just trying to cut as many foods out because I thought that foods were just the trigger. But I didn't
Mhm.
realize how much surrounds your nutrition and just your state and your nervous system. So that has been one huge thing of being aware of that. A second piece is my circadian rhythm and finally understanding how that works. It's not talked about nearly enough, but that has a huge impact on your gut's ability to heal, especially things with like leaky gut. Your gut lining should be able to regenerate every 7 to 14 days with the proper light environments. So really making sure that I got that right because I've had a phone and a laptop basically my whole life. Those two have been critical in particular. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so excited to dive into all of this for the interview, and then just like personally, I have chronic illness. I have Hashimoto's. Done a lot
Same.
try to heal from
Yeah.
all of that, and that's really interesting what you're saying about not just being food, it being stress. So I want to get to that. We'll circle back to that a little bit later. Before we get there, though, in chapter 3, and I guess it's in the subtitle too, you really dive into this problem of being at war with our bodies. I think, and maybe you already mentioned it in the interview. Why did you frame it that way with that phrase? And what is the path to peace?
Yeah, I bring up in the book that part of where it started like echoing in my head was a friend sent me a voice memo, 3 minutes long. And she was like, I just feel like I'm completely at war with my body as she was explaining all of these woes and frustrations that she was going through. And it broke my heart because this is a woman who is very, very Catholic. And of all the battles that we ought to be fighting, against our own body, I don't think is the one. I think it's a completely misdirected because there is a lot of spiritual warfare that's involved in our health. And I don't think that's talked about enough about either. So the first thing is that it shatters my heart. And I have been there where that's exactly what it feels like. That is the exact word. You're on a battlefield every single day, whether it be from an illness or a symptom perspective or the more mental battle, which is also happening. If you have chronic illness, you have a mental and a psychological battle as you are trying to navigate that, where it feels like, man, I can't get my body to do what I want it to do, or is it working against me? Or if you have really, really struggled with your relationship with food, it feels like it's constantly playing in the back of your head. What am I going to eat today? How do I look? Like any glimpse of yourself in a reflective surface can set it off. And women are constantly fighting this. It is exhausting. And what I want you to know is that one, the battle isn't against you, and it's actually not about you. But you have to be aware of what the bigger picture is and who would it benefit for women to be this frustrated and be like, honestly, acting in a way that ends up being super destructive against themselves. Like, who does that benefit? And what are the impacts of that? If that happens generation after generation after generation, it's critical that we be aware of like the battle does not have to be against you. The war can be over. And what is the real battle that we need to be fighting? Because that's where we can really focus our energy.
Mm. Yeah, so I want to get into that for sure. I really, just speaking of like battles, I really loved the screw tape letter that you included.
Yeah.
You probably didn't know this, but I have a screw tape for mom's type book coming out.
Oh,
In a while.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's called the Bellbind letters, and it comes out actually by the time this interview comes out, it might already be out, or it's coming out in a week. So, anyway, I just really loved that.
Wait, can you say the first word again? The what
Yeah,
letters?
the Bellbind letters.
What does that mean?
Bellbind is a type of weed that grows in the garden, and so the demon is named after it. Like it's impossible to get rid of. Like the roots grow down deep, so like even if you pull it at the surface, it just it grows more heads like a hydra demon, and then it can live like 20 feet under the surface, and it just weaves its way through your garden, and it chokes out. It winds its way around all the stuff and chokes everything out. So that's why that's the naming of that demon. But yeah,
Oh,
anyway.
that's incredible. Good.
Yeah. So I really loved the way that you framed it in your book. Definitely like mine's there.
It's
Uh,
the Holy Spirit, I think, is being very, very clear um, that he has a very specific mission right now, and he's giving it to the people that are willing to talk about it. And that's why it feels like so, like we can look around and be like, we're thinking the same thing. Like, how is this even possible? Or like, you're saying that too. Okay, okay. Because it really is the Holy Spirit. And I think this is a critical time, and it's crucial that every single woman understand where these weeds are and the real battle that's going on. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to read it.
yeah, and I love the way that fiction it just helps.
Yeah.
It holds up a mirror, but
It's
we see,
disarming.
and so we could see ourselves in. Yeah, we can see these struggles and weaknesses with more compassion because we have more compassion for other people and characters than we do for ourselves, I think, because we just expect ourselves to be perfect, which you also do a great job of talking about perfectionism in the book. We'll get to that. But what do you think in terms of spiritual battle? What are the biggest lies that women believe about their bodies? And how is this holding us back from flourishing?
One of the biggest lies that's holding you back is the idea that it is selfish or vain to care about your body, and it's actually better if you don't. That couldn't be more untrue. You cannot expect something to blossom and grow unless you pay attention to it. That's just with anything. That's a principle across the board. You can't expect a romantic relationship to flourish if you never look at each other and never have a conversation, never have a positive interaction. You can't expect your children to grow up strong, confident, and well loved if we don't pay attention to them. We can't expect our home to be well kept. Like, it's the law of atrophy. If we
Mhm.
don't pay attention to things and make them better, they're actually not just staying stagnant, they're getting worse. It's the
Right.
same thing with our bodies and with our health. And I think as Catholic women, we know that with the soul, we have to be consistently paying attention and pulling out the weeds and paying attention to the garden of our hearts. But there's a disconnect. And I think it's very sinister that the women who know that we're body soul composites, right? We know theology of the body, we know the unity of body and soul, we know the goodness of the body and the goodness of the human person and the transformation and redemption that's possible through the body. But there's been a separation of it being like, okay, yeah, my soul matters, but my body, oh, I hate my body. Or like I complain about it. Or the way that I talk about it, like no one should ever know how I say, how I talk about it. But there's been this separation, and we need to bring that unity back, because what you do to your body will actually impact your soul. I do deeply believe that.
Mhm.
Like, you working out and you taking time to go work out, that's not selfish, that's not vain, that's not, also, you can also care about your aesthetics. I think that's also something that's not talked about enough, that like you can totally care about beauty. You can like totally be like, "Oh, I want to take good care of myself." And we talk about that, I think, from a marriage lens of it being like, yeah, it's important that we take care of ourselves for our spouses. And that is a priority, but I do think sometimes people feel like they don't have permission to do that. But for multiple reasons, you can care about your body. But that being one of the most sinister, because it will stop you from doing what is essential. And I think a lot of times people go into kind of a land of neglect because they're ignoring it altogether.
Yeah, that's so interesting when you're talking about beauty, because we think about like virtue and vice. It's the virtue is the midpoint
Yeah.
between two extremes. And yes, it is bad to be vain on the one hand, but not caring at all about it is the other end. Like, that's
Yeah.
not the virtuous path. And beauty is one of the great transcendentals. Like, God is the fullness of beauty. So it makes sense. And I think women have a unique gift of God's beauty. Like, we have it in spades. And so being tempted to either end of that spectrum is being tempted away from a gift or a unique way that we have to image God.
Yeah. That it's not just, we don't have to just be aware of excess. We do have to be aware of defect. The
Yeah.
same way that it's like the vanity, yeah, on the other end is being slovenly and being like
Mhm.
totally careless in our appearance. It is something that we talk about as Catholics. Or if we were to think about the same way that you can be like really, really boastful, but being a coward is also a problem. There's these
Mhm.
two opposite ends, and you're right. I think sometimes we pay a little more attention to one and we forget that there's another end of the extreme that we have to be avoiding too.
Yeah, I'm thinking about language of the body. I think there's been a few books about this recently, but there is something that we communicate by the way that we dress our bodies, by the way that we care for our appearance, even aside from just the health aspect too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're right about that.
Everything
But
about, yeah.
I would say, even if we know this in our heads, we're
Yeah.
like, yes, I should, I should, like, I'm totally for it. I'm all bought in, like, intellectually.
Mm.
There's still like guilt and shame around actually taking care of ourselves. How can women reframe this for themselves, especially moms, but I don't think it's only moms, and think about caring our bodies as, I think you said, something that's holy, not, it's not selfish. Can
Yeah.
you help us with that?
Yeah. I give away the answer in the title of the book. Like, I start with the entire premise, and my thesis is that you believing that you were made good will change the trajectory of your life. It will change everything about the way that you eat, the way that you live, the way that you dress, the way that you move. We have to start with this core belief, this foundational belief that God made you good, because from there is no shame. There is no fear. There is no doubting who you are, because it's just receiving your identity as a daughter again. That's all
Mhm.
it is. And there's no figuring out. I think a lot of times we're going around and trying to figure out what we're worth. And I think that's also a big root of perfectionism, which most women struggle with really, really deeply, which is what, at the end of the day, this is a way for me to keep the love that is around me. That is like the lie that's in our heart of, if I'm perfect, I will still be loved. If I show that I don't have flaws, like maybe people will stay around and love me. And if we don't have to live out of those fears, if we don't have to earn our worth outside or how we act, we don't have to earn anything. It's already been given to us. And so when it's like, oh, but the journey from the head to the heart, it's the longest journey of our entire lives. And so that's why we have to start with the head. We have to start with the intellect, and that will then form the way that we feel, because we can't just be like, okay, I feel like I'm good. Like I guess I really matter. And yeah, you can't really think yourself all the way into that, but the Lord can speak truth. And that is what will finally pierce even the darkest parts of our heart, where we wonder, like, who am I really? And how does he see me? From that place, everything changes, even down to the way that you eat.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, Such good points. So I think that you mentioned already that we are composite beings of mind, our soul, and our body. But I think that a lot of times we really still operate, even if we know that, we still operate as though we're really only minds, or that if we are body mind, our minds are primary and body is really secondary to who we are.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit to that misconception and maybe elaborate on why what we do with our body matters?
Yeah. I was standing in line at the post office once, and someone was on the phone in front of me, and they made a joke. And they were like, oh, I'm just stuck in this flesh suit. And I have never forgot it ever since. One, it's a gross phrase. Two, it's completely theologically untrue. Like that, there is nothing about it. I know Christopher West has said, your body and your soul is like juice to a peach, and the importance to understand what that integration looks like. There's also a very interesting church document on gender and the body that talks about how the body is not a burden. And I think that's how a lot of people walk around. And let's be so real. When you are symptomatic, when you are not feeling well, or when you have that battle going on in your head, yeah, it can feel like a burden. And so to begin with the idea of like, my body reflects my soul, and this is actually a gift that I've been given to steward. This is the temple of the Holy Spirit, which we know that, but it's also like, okay, well, what's the point of a temple? It's a place to go and worship. This is a place where I can glorify God. And I do take kind of the, oh my goodness, I'm blanking right now. Philothea. Introduction to Devout Life. St. Francis of Sales. You know
Yeah.
how he talks about how like Catholics should be some of the best dressed people in the room? Not flashy, but he's like, I do want you to present yourself well. And I do think that it's important to recognize that when people look at you, they can tell what you believe. And this is something that we know, right? The way that you dress, right? If we dress modestly as Catholic women, or we dress up to go to church, it's like, wow, she really believes that she's going somewhere important.
Mm-hmm.
Where in a world now that is extremely casual, right? Where with the modesty and the dignity that you dress yourself, you go, wow, she kind of stands out differently, especially when you're younger. Maybe when you're like in high school and in college and everyone's wearing one thing and you're wearing the opposite, you're showing what you believe. And so if we are going to say that we are temples of the Holy Spirit, if we're going to believe scripture, then the way that we treat our bodies should reflect that. So if it shows that, like, wow, she takes care of herself, she goes out, she nourishes her body well, she doesn't like treat her body like a trash can, or she doesn't forget about it. This is really, really critical to showing what you truly believe. And the more that we act in a certain direction, the more we do believe it. It instills it more deeply. So the more that you say, you know what, I am struggling, but I want to believe that I'm made good and that my body is worth taking care of. And for that reason alone, I'm going to go to the gym today, right? I want to believe that my body is good and worth taking care of. So for that reason alone, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to get myself some new groceries. Like, you don't have to believe it first to then take action. Action is the fastest way to change your brain and to really transform what you're doing. But your actions matter, and it has to align with what you at least want to believe to be true from scripture.
Yeah, fake it till you make it is really, it's a real thing.
It's neuroscience, but
Yeah.
your brain doesn't know the difference. So if you go start acting like that, like I remember a few years ago, I was like, I'm going to start acting like I love the gym. Like someone who grew up hating the gym. But I was like, I'm going to start acting like this is my favorite thing to do. And I would just like pump myself mentally. And then when I started going to Pilates, I was like, I'm going to act like I belong here. I didn't feel like I belonged there. I felt totally out of place. But your brain will catch up way faster if you just like move in one direction.
Yeah. That's true about smiles too. Like
Yeah.
your brain can't tell the difference if you choose to smile.
So I talked about
Your
this.
if you're just naturally smiling, it's the same chemicals that are released.
I talk about that in the beginning of the book because that was a huge healing point for me in terms of my body image issues.
Mm,
When I was in high school was one of the first times where I was like, I can't be at war with my body forever. Like, we're going to be together for the rest of my life and then some. Like, your
mm,
body's going with you everywhere you go, including to the eternal life. So I was like, we got to figure something out. I can't just like tear myself apart every single time I look in the mirror. So I was like, I have no idea how to do this. One thing I can think of is fake it till you make it. And I'm gonna smile at myself every single time I pass a reflective surface. So I remember intentionally being like, instead of scrutinizing myself, I was like, I'm gonna smile. We had this like one mirror in our hallway that I would pass by basically everywhere I went in the house. And I would look, lock eyes, smile, be like, okay, and then move on. And it totally worked. And it's been like 15 years since that. And I still will smile at myself all the time. It's like a natural thing. But again, your brain does not know, and it'll release all the feel good chemicals that come from that. And you do really start to heal the
mm,
perception of yourself by doing that.
mm.
There's so much that you can do by just taking action first.
Creating that association.
Yeah.
You do definitely go into the disordered relationship that we have with food. So, I mean, this is a perfect time to talk about fasting and feasting because
Yeah.
we're headed
Yeah.
into Lent, and I think this will come out right at the beginning of Lent. But how does our relationship with food get disordered in the first place? And then what are some ways that we can get it back on track?
Yeah. Complex. I think the majority, it can often start at home. That is very, very common. And I know that I get a lot of messages from moms being like, well, how do I make sure my daughter doesn't grow up with issues?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they did, or they just know about them and they're like, how do I protect their minds? And I think we always have to remember that children are sponges, and a sensitive heart will take in everything. And that's the biggest thing. Like in my home, we ate beautifully. My mom cooked us every single meal. She always made sure that we were super well nourished and taken care of. But it was like little tiny things, like a comment on the playground, or like someone saying something at the new school that I went to, or just I was the biggest girl in my class. So that alone was kind of hard as a girl. And then when people start commenting on it, like I was a foot taller than everyone else. And that was hard for me. I couldn't wrap my head around some of it. And I was little, and I would keep these things into myself. But so I think sometimes most of the women that I work with will come with stories of, man, every diet that my mom went on, the whole house had to go on. So really being aware of like, what are we perceiving above us? And that's why it's so important that the way you heal will heal generations after you. And it's worth it. And you're worth the time and the effort because you have no idea how many other people will benefit from your own healing. So there's one thing about at home, there's also the culture is incredibly dark and incredibly sinister because again, the body only has as much value as you give it. And so the body is now only valuable if it is attractive or sexual, or it's only valuable in certain circumstances, or it's only valuable if it looks certain ways. And there's a lot of money and there's a lot of pressure. And then social media has also kind of opened a whole new can of worms in terms of what standards are for beauty. And that's why I think, again, we always have to come back to identity and every little girl in our lives, and even the little girl in your own heart, of making sure that she understands, like, okay, well, who do you need to be? Like, what for you to be good? What do you have to be? And it's just you have to be you, and you have to be how God made you. There's nothing that you have to earn outside of that. But those external sources, kind of like what you're. I can't wait to read your book now. I'm so excited. But that is the perfect analogy of that kind of weed, and it has to be I also talk about it in the book as like landmines that, certain parts of the world, they're just like blocked off because there's like their minds somewhere. They're buried here. And sometimes it can feel like our brain is like that you're like, ooh, I will step one place and it feels like something gets triggered and explodes. Like one comment or one situation happens.
Mhm.
And it can bring up really old wounds or something that you're like,
Yeah.
man, I didn't even know that was still affecting me. And so that's where prayer and the sacraments and knowing the tenderness of the Father, I think, is one of the most critical things. As cool as it would be if I could just be like, if you eat this, this, and that, if you journal this, this, and that, and if you do this protocol, you will completely be healed and restored. But even better, I'm being so sincere when I say that the fastest way to healing is throwing ourselves into the arms of the Father. which that alone can be one of the greatest challenges of your life
Mhm.
if you didn't grow up with a good
Yeah.
father, or if that's a
Mhm.
complicated or painful subject. I understand that deeply. But that is, I do believe that that is the path to healing, is hearing the father. Do you know how he looks at you? Do you know how he sees you? Do you like receive your identity as daughter from him? And from that place of tenderness, then we can move forward and we can heal.
Mhm. Yeah, I like the way you put that, because especially somebody who is like struggling with illness and trying to find the solution, but even outside of that, even before I knew I was sick, I still always was just searching for like, this is the system that's going to solve, like if I get the right kind of Montessori toys, my children will be well behaved and entertain themselves on their own. Like if I organize my closets in this way and only keep the things that spark joy, like
Yeah.
across, it's not limited to food and eating. I think we just always want the system
Answers.
or the thing that's going to fix everything. And I am willing to pay a lot of money for the thing, and people are willing to sell me stuff that will fix things. But you're right. And I think actually the fact that none of those things ultimately can satisfy us is a feature, not a bug. Like all of that and its insufficiency is supposed to lead us to say, oh, wait, I can't do this on my own. Like, God, here, please fix this.
That's one of those things where I think it's easy to compare ourselves with healing journeys. Or
Mhm.
you look like I remember having a conversation with a client once, and she was really frustrated because she wasn't getting pregnant. She has her baby now. It's amazing. But she was getting really, really frustrated. And she was like, I got to be honest with you. The crackhead at McDonald's is having an easier time getting pregnant than I am. And I care. They were like, this person is doing all the
Mhm.
wrong things and I'm trying to do everything right. Like, why is this not working for me? And I always think about Father Boniface Hicks talks about how God will never answer the prayers that cause you to need him less. And so your healing journey is yours, and he will only work in the ways that will heal you the most profoundly and the most completely, because that's who he is. He's not going to leave things half done, and he's not going to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to relieve these symptoms." And this is what my story is. He could have relieved the symptoms, which is all that I wanted. But instead, he was like, let's go all the way back to the garden. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. And where did these things come from? Because otherwise, the weeds are just going to go back. We're just like trimming them and being like, I don't see it anymore. But that's not what he wants. He wants this complete transformation. And so a lot of the times, like, yeah, he won't just allow this X protocol to work, because he wants to do that and then some. And we have to begin with like, what is going on in your mind, which is really my hope for the book, is that you can begin to comb through like what is in your heart, what is in your mind when you um, kind of meditate on the reality of your body, and where have you been, and what kind of aches are you carrying that he wants to help heal.
Yeah, I can see that there's I have it here. There's a lot of space in here for like
Mhm.
reflection. There's a place to write, to go through that and to do that prayer and work. I thought that was a really neat feature. That
Yeah,
was
I'm
um,
uh, I'm a very firm believer that you have to get your thoughts out of your brain.
mm,
So, one being like writing it down, you're going to slow you down your thoughts. You can't write as fast as you can think.
right.
So, slowing it down, seeing what the dominant thought that comes out is. And then, two, my hope is that people will be able to talk about it with each other. We're starting our book club this month and making sure that, like, you know that you're not the only one. That's one of the biggest things for women, is that you're like, if people knew that this is what I think, like, they would think I'm crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm actually really mean, or I'm really suffering, or I'm struggling, or I can't see the other side of this. But then you open up to other women and you're like, oh, we're all thinking the exact same thing. Like,
Mhm.
that's really crazy, which is, again, some kind of spiritual warfare.
Is the book club, is that something people can join in?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
can we hear about that? I mean, sure, we would have gotten to it eventually, but since it came up, can we hear about that?
Yes, I just think that there's nothing quite as healing as community, and there's just a certain power in Catholic women getting together. So we want you to go through the book, and then we want to go through it all together. So we're going to have a book club for our podcast listeners, or for anyone in our Made Good community, because sometimes you just need to say things out loud and actually like process and work through
Mhm.
it, so that, again, the biggest thing I want is for you to know that you're not the only one and that you're not alone.
Yeah. So how can people join into that book club?
Yeah, it'll be on the website at thecatholicnutritionist.com.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
When does it start?
I think, you said this is coming out in March?
No, it'll come out in a couple weeks.
Oh,
But
nice. I think our first
right,
session.
right before or beginning of Lent.
Oh, great. I think this is the first session is February 23rd. And we'll probably have a couple running throughout the year, just because we want everyone to have the chance.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So even if people are coming back and listening later,
Still go to the website,
you can still
still
find
see.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. So let's circle back because I really do want to get into stress. You do have this chapter on stress that breaks down how it affects us, and it's all really fascinating. But something that you do, I think, really well is take really complex science and then make it easily understood and actionable to actually help listeners take the science that we have and then use it in their lives to fix the things that are going haywire. And I especially would love it if you could explain the polyvagal theory of the nervous system and then the practical tools we can use to hack ourselves into this deeper sense of peace and well-being.
Yes. Okay. This chapter is called When Stress Less Feels Like a Fairy Tale. When you have been told, like, just like stress less, like fix your stress, work on your stress. And I've had so many women be like, I can't. Like, this
Or
is
really
just,
stressful advice to hear
it
also.
is.
You're stressed and you need to stop it.
Yes. And then you're like, I'm stressed about how stressed I am and how can I de-stress? And that's stressing me out, how many different tools I need to use. So I wanted to bring up the polyvagal theory because I think it gives you a very simple framework to understanding what you are probably feeling many times a day. I would say, especially for moms of young kids, because you are probably climbing up and down that ladder very, very often. But basically, I want you to imagine that you often think about like, oh, fight or flight. But sometimes people are like, well, I don't feel like I'm in fight or flight. I feel kind of like a shell of myself. Like, if no one bothered me, I could lay on the couch and scroll for 5 hours straight, right? I feel completely frozen and stuck. And that is a state of the nervous system when we have entered into shutdown. And so if you think about the ladder, at the very top of the ladder, this is you at your most connected. This is you when you feel free, when you feel creative, when you feel peaceful, when you can handle things that are being thrown at you. But I think connected is an important word to consider because think about like the last time that you felt not stressed, when you were like, man, I'm feeling really, really good. When your child or your spouse comes talk to you, or when you're invited to a party that you don't know people, you might find that you're like, yeah, let's do this. Like I want to get out there. I want to be seen. I want to be known. I want to connect with people. That's a really, really critical thing because once we start entering into more of a survival mode, that connection piece doesn't become as important because you're thinking mostly about your survival. So we can imagine that the next level below that is where we enter more of this fight or flight. This might be an actual moment of fight or flight where someone cuts you off on the freeway and you thought you're about to get in an accident. You feel your pulse racing, you might start sweating, you might be breathing a little bit more heavily, or this can happen when maybe something really bad happens at work. You have a really bad conflict and you're in a are like really tense arguing match with a coworker, and that can be a fight or flight. You can be living in that regularly. But then the state below that is where we have that dorsal vagal shutdown. And this is where you might feel you're least connected. This is where you might feel like a shell of yourself. You feel completely stuck, frozen, even numb would be some of those things. And the reason I think it's important to imagine that ladder is because then it goes, okay, wait, I don't need to be overwhelmed and think that like this is going to last forever or that there's no way out of this. I can simply imagine what does my body need to go up a few rungs? How do I get back up there? And oh, okay, right now I'm having this crisis or this circumstance, or let's say if you have been shut down for a while, there's been a lot of things going on in your life and you have just felt shut down. It being the goal isn't how do I change my entire life, but what is going to help my body feel safe and able to connect again. I think that those are two concepts that can be a little bit easier to digest because sometimes a lot of health things can just feel like, well, how could I possibly know? You know, like how could I possibly know what it's going to take to get there? But if we think about, okay, well, me at my most connected, me at my most calm, me at my most peaceful, she walks outside a lot. You know, like if you're like, what I do know is me at my best, I take time outside. Me at my worst, I will scroll on my phone for hours. Like I will numb out with my phone. Okay, so this is a sign that this is where my body is, and this is how to help my body back out of it. But a lot of it is just about being human. But I do just want every single woman to know that you don't need to change every single circumstance in your life. For example, one circumstance that I address for a moment in the book is mothers of children with special needs or caretakers of family members with special needs. And that is a cross that I understand very, very deeply. And it's very close to me. And that's one of those things where your child is a blessing, right? Moms don't usually phrase it as like, my child is a cross, but there are very real crosses there. And it's going to be lifelong. And that's not something that's just going to change. We can't just be like, oh, I need to move or I need to change jobs. But this is just a circumstance where the Lord is going to use this to sanctify, to heal. And that child is bringing so much joy and so much light and so much of the Holy Spirit into the home. And so that's one of those where it's like, well, you're not going to change your circumstances, but how do we teach your body to get in and out of these dysregulated states? How do we teach it to be flexible? How do we teach your brain to come back into safety? And that can be something as simple as, you know what, I'm going to do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things that I can see, 4 things that I can touch, right? And having these practical grounding tools, because it's not about your life being an impediment to your healing. That's one thing that I want to make sure people know, is that the people that you've been given in your life, the circumstances that God has given you, are not barriers to you living a full life. They're actually going to be the avenues. And sometimes we just need a few more tools to be able to engage with that properly.
Yeah. So what would be the top things then that you would offer to somebody who says, okay, yeah, I need to work on this stress pillar of health and wellness?
Yeah.
What would be some practical things they could do?
My number one tip is that your phone is helpful, but it is not your friend. It is not your nervous system's friend. And we have to be very honest and recognize that this is actually designed by tens of thousands of people and billions of dollars to keep you fixated and to keep you addicted and to keep you from being present in your own life. And that is something that's very critical. And I know that it feels like the easiest tool because it's a quick hit of dopamine and it's a quick distraction and it's a quick way to kind of escape from our lives. But whatever it is that is going on, escaping it is only going to cause it to double. Like this isn't one of those things, like whatever feelings it is, whatever kind of chaos or stress that is affecting you, burying our head in the sand is going to actually ricochet and it's going to backfire pretty quickly. So recognizing that your phone is not a regulating tool, it's actually a dysregulating tool. So that cannot be the first thing that we turn to. The second thing would be if you're like, I don't have time. I think that's something that I hear a lot, being like, is nervous system work like supposed to be some 6-month retreat in Bali? Like, what are we going to be doing? I have to live my life. Huh?
That's what I was going to say. That sounds nice.
Like, I wish. But it's really,
Do
it's about adjusting in the moment. I think one way to see it is if you have ever been around a toddler, ever, you know that connection has to come before correction, right?
it.
That we have to, if your toddler is freaking out and throwing a tantrum after hitting their sister and getting put into timeout, that isn't the moment to teach them that we
Yeah.
don't hit. Like, it's not going to work. It's not going to land. And they actually might just flare up even worse. And it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be chaos for everyone. Everyone's going to be crying. So instead, it's about like, okay, how do I help calm this child down first? I have to teach them to regulate their emotions. Yes, they might scream, but I'm going to be there with them, or I'm going to teach them how we do this properly. And it's the same thing for you. As you like are experiencing, first we have to like give ourselves a second to notice it and recognizing that something is always better than nothing. So let's say you have a heated argument with your husband in the kitchen during dinner time, and you're like, I'm about to lose it, or it's causing that shutdown again. And you're like, I just want to go upstairs and scroll on my phone. The more valuable thing is, can I just take 30 seconds to be in it and know that most emotions will pass within about 100 seconds? Like, that's how long it takes for those neurotransmitters to pass. So can I just breathe this out for 100 seconds and then go on to whatever it is that I need to do? But just recognizing that you don't need a ton of time. You just need the presence to be there in the moment. That's the main key, I think, to beginning, especially for women that are busy or that are moms and think that this is going to be a massive project. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Right. So, is the menstrual cycle a gift or a curse?
It is a gift. And I know it doesn't feel that way because I used to be like, this is a curse. When it's painful, when it's dysregulated, when it's affecting your quality of life, it certainly can feel that way. But you need to see that as an invitation and as a red flag that your body is sending a signal that it needs help. And there is so much you can do. I honestly didn't realize that. I thought it was genetic. I thought that it was like, well, everyone in our family is like this, or like, this is just like a common thing. And I'm just doomed to this, to like painful, heavy, just excruciating periods that are very confusing, I didn't realize how much of it is actually just your body's response based on the inputs that it's given. So the
Mhm.
foods, the sleep, the lifestyle, the movement, like what kind of inflammation is being created. And so it is not a curse. It is a great reminder of how to live in seasons. I think that women have a particular gift in that. If you can understand your feminine rhythms, you can understand seasonality. You can understand seasons of rest and harvest a lot better. You can understand what it's going to take for you to have a healthy postpartum. If you can live your period well, then when you are in bed with a baby and postpartum and very uncomfortable and bleeding and all those kinds of things, you can actually learn to live those better. So I think it's actually a phenomenal blessing when you finally understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot, like so many people struggle with this inflammation issue, not just if you're experiencing cycle related stuff, but like asthma, allergies,
Mhm, mhm.
eczema, those are all very common inflammatory symptoms. I get a lot of like joint pain and stuff with my Hashimoto's. What are some things people can do if they're noticing that either themselves or their family members, if their mom's caring for their families and dads, what could they do, or some easy kind of levers to pull to combat that inflammation?
Yeah, one thing that I think is critical, every single person needs to know how to take care of their circadian rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the easiest way to pull those levers. So that is your when you think about circadian rhythm, you probably think about your sleep wake cycles. The truth is that you have this master clock that lives in your brain, and every cell in your body is trying to keep time. Even the bacteria in our gut is circadian. Every single cell, every single system is trying to keep time. And when we can have that in harmony, that's when your body knows, okay, this is what we're supposed to be doing at this time. And it can address all of the processes. One piece of that would be your sleep. Another piece of that would be your light exposure. So getting outside and sleeping properly. Most Americans do not sleep properly. They're sleeping in bright rooms. They're sleeping with the TV on. They're sleeping with a lot of just very inflammatory signals around them, their phone, their Wi-Fi router, a lot of Bluetooth in their rooms that affects you
Mm-hmm.
on a cellular level. So creating darkness and stillness, and the time that you sleep matters just as much as how much you sleep. So people will think, but I'm getting 8 hours, but those 8 hours are from midnight to 8 a.m. There's a huge difference between being asleep after 11 and before 11. And that alone can reduce massive amounts of inflammation. It will have a huge impact on your cycle, on your Hashimoto's, your thyroid health. There's a lot of women with thyroid issues. On your metabolism. If you've been struggling to lose weight, you need to work on your sleep. And then light. When you think about it, the average person is only going out if they're intentional,
Mm-hmm.
especially people that live not in California. I live in California where we can go out like 364 days a year. But the average person might be like, oh, yeah, on the days that I remember to take a 15-minute walk, I'm outside for 15 minutes out of 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Like, average person is not spending time outside, and sunlight is one of the most healing things that we have. Your body needs sunlight. And I'm not talking about like sunny, perfect California weather. I mean light in general. It can be a completely clouded over day in the middle of Ohio, and your body still needs those light signals. So that's one of my favorite ways, because it really is going back to the garden. It's like living the way that we were designed to live. It's very modern and strange the way that we live now, that we're inside in air conditioned buildings all year long with artificial lights any time of day. It's unnatural, and it's harming us deeply. And there's a lot of studies and a lot of statistics around our circadian disruption and increased rates of disease and cancer and dysfunction within the body. So that would be one thing. And then using your food wisely, knowing how to nourish properly. Like for you, do you drink aloe vera juice every day?
No, I don't think I've ever had aloe vera. I put it on my like sunburn, but I don't think I've ever had it to drink.
It's a Hashimoto staple. So like for Hashimoto's, you really have to care
Go
about
get
your
some right when this is over.
yeah, yeah, literally. There's a study that came out that it showed that I think it was a smaller study. It was probably like a 50 or 150 women, but that they were consuming, I think, between 4 to 6 ounces of aloe vera juice every day and saw a reduction in their antibodies, because Hashimoto's is intrinsically tied to gut inflammation, and you always have to care about them. So there's a lot of cool tools
Yeah.
and ways that you can use food to help heal and support whatever concern it is that you have.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, Going back to the light question.
Yeah.
So I used to live in sunny Southern California.
You used to live in sunshine and now you live where?
We used to be in the sun, and now we are in Idaho, which, part of the year is very, very
Amazing.
sunny.
Yeah.
And this particular part of the year, I'm like, I don't want to go outside. It's cold and it's
Yeah.
dark and it's cold. I don't like the cold. But I know we need to get outside. So how much time do we need to be spending outside? Because I very much just want to be inside. I have a little light box. Like, I'm sure that's not actually sufficient, but we so what should we be doing instead, especially thinking about my kids as a family, uh,
Yeah.
when we need to get this light exposure?
So the first thing is, obviously, the caveat to what I'm saying is when it's dangerously cold, don't do that. Like,
Well, it doesn't
obviously,
get dangerously cold.
does it? I have girls that
No,
live.
I grew up in Hawaii, so I'm
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
empathetic about
You're
cold.
like me. We're just a little
When I was
dramatic.
in California in the winter, I would be like, I'm not going outside. It's cold.
Yeah,
It's 50
I'm putting
degrees.
on a puffer every night to go take my dog on a walk, and it's like 67 degrees.
Yeah.
So I understand you. So obviously, when it's like dangerously cold outside, wind chill is -40, whatever, not the case. But otherwise, I think the most important thing is recognizing, well, kids are really cool because they're really cool examples of what natural health looks like before we start getting kind of comfortable and complacent. Like here, our Pacific Ocean is freezing all year. Like it's just so cold at all times. You will go on a cold day to the beach and somehow, somewhere, there's a child in the water. They
Mhm.
don't care. It's the most beautiful thing. And the same thing with the snow. Like if you think about when you were little, getting out to be outside for a snow day, you're like, I don't even care. I'm going to layer up. My mom's going to make me, but I'm going to be outside all day. And I think we forget some of that playfulness as we become adults because we want to be comfortable, but we're not recognizing that you will go from uncomfortable to comfortable within about 15 to 30 minutes of being outside. Like
Mhm.
you'll adjust very quickly.
Mhm.
Another thing is that it's important to recognize that the body, without getting too technical, it has something called brown fat
Mhm.
that is activated by the cold. And basically, the more time you spend in the cold, the easier it is for you to be in the cold. So the people
Mhm.
that are outside often have a way easier time. People that are inside in their heating all year long have a miserable time getting outside. So part of it is you just have to like force yourself for a little bit. It's kind of like prayer that you have like the first 15 minutes when you haven't been to the chapel in a while that you're like, ooh, this is like uncomfortable to be
Uh-huh.
sitting still. And then you kind of ease into it. It's the same thing. I think investing in proper base layers, so wool base layers, wool socks, and not wearing like too much polyester that will make you super sweaty and uncomfortable is
Mhm.
actually really easy to make it more pleasant to be outside. And then it's about maximizing. It really is about like how much can we spend out there. If we were going to start, I would say 20 minutes before 10 a.m
Okay.
would be the best place to start, especially for your thyroid health, because you could totally get that Hashimoto's into
Mhm.
remission. You know what I'm saying? That's like my number one goal of this year is that I'm going to be like, we're going to knock it out. Last year was pretty stressful, but this year it's my mission. And part of that is the sunlight. So being outside for at least 20 minutes in the morning, but then also making a game of like, well, how much can we spend outside? Like
Mhm.
1,000 hours outside, starting at the beginning of the year through winter is a really, really cool mission to have. And it makes it a game with your kids too.
Yeah. Yeah, we have the little downloadable.
Yeah, the color in.
Yeah, it is. The kids are much better about it than I am, but
It's
as
so
my
easy
new
for them.
goal, that'll be my new goal. I will definitely do the 20 minutes. I'm committing
Awesome.
to it right now. I'm going to get myself some aloe vera juice, and then in a year, I'll let you know how my.
Good. Good. I love it. I love it. Less than a year. Just follow up in a couple months.
Yeah, okay. So I think a lot of us really want to make lasting changes for our health, but it can be really difficult to keep it up all the time. And it can be really discouraging when we fall off the bandwagon, speaking for myself for sure here, and wondering if all of the effort that we're putting in to try to improve our health, all these changes, is it even making a difference?
Mm.
So for those of us who really struggle with perfectionism, does it need to be all or nothing? What do we do when we get discouraged?
Yeah, phenomenal question. I think the first way to prepare yourself well and to avoid unnecessary discouragement would be to make sure that you have proper strategy. If you have proper this is what I walk my clients through. That's why if someone like sometimes around week 6, someone will be like, or I'm like, really stressful situation came up, or I feel like I'm not where I'm supposed to be, or like certain habits. And I'm always just like, like, just you wait. And then they get over the hump by like week 8. It's incredible. It's like down to a science now because I know that the strategy works and the process is so proven I don't
Mm.
even really bat an eye anymore. So part of that is the confidence that comes from knowing that you're doing something that's science-based and that will
Yeah.
actually get you results. Because then you can just have this expectant faith of being like, yeah, I expect that if I lift heavy things with proper strategy and proper nutrition, I will grow muscle. Like, period. That's just how
Mhm.
it works. I expect that if I start walking every single day, my mileage will get faster and I will get stronger. That's just how it works. So part of it is making sure that you're going in with the right strategy, because otherwise you will cause yourself a lot of frustration and no one wants that. Second thing is, I always like to imagine that nothing is wasted. So if you were really, really good at eating right and working out when you were in your early 20s, maybe in college, you were like at a peak, and then life has kind of gotten a little rambunctious and you're now in your mid to late 30s and you're like, man, I'm not who I used to be. The cool thing is the body remembers. And so even the muscle that you built, if you actually built muscle in your younger years, it is easier for you to build muscle again when you are older. That's amazing. And I think that's one principle. And there's so much hope that once we finally learn the body, there's so much hope that you're like, man, this is on the same team and nothing that I do is wasted. And so I always train my clients to be very aware of the language that they use. Things like failure, or that I've fallen off completely, or that I haven't made any progress, it's just not helpful language. And so instead, thinking like, yeah, you might be shifting gears, right?
Mhm.
You might be going really high speed at certain times of the year where you're like, have less on your plate and you have more room to focus and your mind just feels really sharp and you have the right game plan and the right support and it's easy. And so that's when you're like moving the fastest. And then maybe something really intense happened. Maybe you lost a family member. Everything had to kind of like stop, focus on one priority, which might be your family at that time, and then you slow things down. But I don't see it as a failure, because you can decide that you're back literally anytime. You can decide that you're going to pick back up at any time, and knowing that nothing that you do is ever wasted. And also properly preparing yourself of being like, I always like to imagine that there's three levels. So there's like the at my very best, the very most excellent, when I'm living the ideal. What does that look like? And then what's like my more average, my coasting, I can do this even if like the kid schedules are a little bit more intense, or if I'm not 100% focused, I can still get these things done. And then there's like the survival mode of, you know what, at the bare minimum, come hell or high water, I at least do this, right?
Mhm.
So with nutrition, that might be like my ideal is that I meal prep for the entire week. I cook at home. I have everything within the right micro and macronutrients for myself. I have my supplement stack and I'm on a roll. Then maybe you're kind of like average coasting is I meal prep pretty much everything. And some of it might be like half prepped. It's kind of semi homemade vibe, right? That
Yeah.
it's like some things grabbed and dropped. It's not as thoughtful and perfect, but I'm eating really well and it's consistent. And then you're like, come hell or high water, I know that I have an old chuck roast that's in the freezer that I can throw into the crock pot, and I have some beans in the pantry, and I have some potatoes in the fridge. And that's what it is. Or true survival mode would be like, I know which pre-made meals to buy. I'm going to
Mhm.
buy myself a rotisserie chicken and a salad kit. I still eat, I get my protein in, but I don't have to think. Or when I have to go out to eat, I know what I'm going to get. Like that you have that, but that only comes with proper strategy and proper formation of what you need. But expecting that life is going to be tumultuous and
Mhm.
you being perfect every single day of the year is just not reality. And I think part of it too is the humility of knowing I can't be surprised that I'm not perfect. I can't like let it shock me that life is constantly changing and throwing different curveballs at me. Like 3 months from now, we're going to look back on this time of year and be like, I had no idea what was going to be coming. Like I had no idea what I was saying. And you could probably think about that for every like 6 months of your life. Something totally new comes up that you didn't see coming. So I think we need to stop being surprised. And then when you're restarting, I want you to always know that like resistance is like the cost of playing the game. You are going to start with resistance, and any destination that you want to reach, you start with a parked car. The car is parked. Like, don't be surprised that you have to like gun the engine and get it going and hit the gas, and like that there is effort and momentum that needs to be put in the beginning. Doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, that the beginning is a little bit more challenging, but you go, oh yeah, I had to park the car because there were certain things that needed my attention. Or you could be really honest if it's like, I just stopped caring, or like I lost discipline, whatever it may be. But being like, yeah, I parked the car. That was an intentional choice. I'm going to get back in it. We're going to start over. But I think it's important to like, what are you making it mean about yourself is a big question I ask my clients a lot. when it's like, oh, well, I'm failing or I'm dropping this or I haven't been doing this, whatever. Okay, how do we remove the emotion from this situation? What are you making it mean about yourself? Because if we're taking it super personally and creating a lot of shame, it's going to be way harder. Like that doesn't actually, it's the same thing with confession. You know, Father Jacques Philippe?
Not personally, but yes, I've read his stuff. Love it.
I went to one of his retreats a few years ago in Colorado, and it was phenomenal. But he talked about how something that he listens for is if someone in confession is really harping on old sins. If
Mm,
someone comes to confession and is like, oh, Father, I've confessed this 20 times already, but I just can't let it go. He was like, they think that that's like a pious thing and that they're showing God how sorry they are. He's like, it's not. It's two things. It's either a lack of humility or it's a lack of trust. And
yeah.
so the humility piece of it being like he had this imagery of when we have a shoestring, right, or a string. Imagine that that's us connected to God in heaven. And when we sin, it's like cutting off that string, right? We know that the sin, it's total separation. But you come to confession, and what happens? It's reunited, and we tie it. And what happens when you tie two strings together? It's actually shorter than it was in the first place. You're closer to him than you were in the first place. And I like to have that same perspective with your health, that every time you kind of stop and pick things back up again, you're actually more advanced than you were the first time. You've learned more. You've understood yourself. You know what you need to be healthy and to be consistent even more. And you should actually be really proud of yourself every time you pick yourself back up. So he talked about it as like a humility thing, but then also the lack of trust of being like, I don't trust that God forgives me. And the same thing of we have to have this trust of he is going to give me the grace. If I'm going to start waking up early and taking care of myself, whatever it may be, I know that he's going to give me the grace. And even the thought that I want to be doing this is a good sign that I'm on the right track. A lot
Yeah.
of it has to be gentleness.
Beautiful. I love that so much. This has been so helpful and motivating for me personally. Like very,
Good.
yeah, and I know that it will be for listeners as well. So thank you so much. There is one question that we ask, or we that I ask all of our listeners at the end of every episode, and so that is if you could pick one person, alive or dead, real or fictional, who exemplifies the very best of being human, who would it be and why?
And I can't say Mary.
You can. Yeah.
Um,
Whoever you want. Real, alive or dead, real or fictional. Anybody you want.
that being human.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it has to be Mary. And I know that's so Catholic of me. Is that what everyone says?
No,
What?
I don't think anybody has. Somebody might have said like Mary and Jesus before. I'm not sure anybody picked Mary yet.
Okay. The reason I say Mary is because she's real. You know, like you do watch her live the full range of human emotions, but we know that she's the perfect woman because she lived in this perfect union with God. But she was still like afraid when the angel appeared and still chose to say yes and give her fiat. And she was anxious when she lost Jesus in the temple and she stood by him. And we can't even imagine the sorrow and the suffering that she had to watch in living with her sin. But I also imagine that because we get to see how deeply she lived those sufferings, she must have lived immense joy and the fullness of being in like constant connection with our Lord and our Father and the Holy Spirit. I just can't even imagine the depth of joy and of being human that she got to experience. That's so cool. Just to imagine Our Lady's joy
Yeah.
blows my mind.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. It's a great answer. Where can listeners find the book and connect with you and your work and your podcast and all of that?
Yes. If you are wrapping up this episode and you want to pick up another one, you can go onto Spotify or your podcast app, wherever you're listening, and look up the Made Good podcast. That is a hoot and a half. It's going to have everything you need for living well with a Christ-centered life. My book, Made Good, is out now by Sophia Institute. You can also get it on Amazon. And then our website where you can join the book club and find everything about us is thecatholicnutritionist.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here today, giving of yourself and your time. It's been really enlightening, and I am very excited to dive in and then fail and then get back on the wagon and be closer to my health goals. Thank you so much for all of that inspiration. Thank you.
Such a good perspective. Thank you so much for having me.